All right. Well, hello, and welcome everyone to our BG5 Live. And today we are going to take a look at growth cannot exist without friction. And speaking of my cat, there she goes. She's back. So welcome everyone. Today is September 17th, 2019. This is episode number 24. So before we jump in and get started, let's say hello to our panel. So Natalie, hello, and welcome.
Yes, welcome everyone. I'm glad to be here, and this is an exciting one. I have this trait as well in my design. So.
Yeah, I have this trait in my, I think all of us, I think except for Lavina, and I have it specifically in what we're going to be taking a look at today as well. So yeah, so we're going to be taking a look at trait number 6. Again, growth cannot exist without friction. So Lavina, oops, as I...
Hey everybody, so glad to be here with you. Excited for today's conversation.
Great to have you. And Chris, welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Welcome everyone. We're so glad you're here. And yes, I have the trait 6 as well. So this is going to be fun. This is a good one.
Yep, I agree. Mm-hmm. So let's just jump in and get started. And I do want to do a quick reminder, though, that this is the last week to register for the BG5 foundation courses. So we had the first class free last week. So Natalie on Thursday. Lavina on Friday. So if you go to bg5businessinstitute.com/courses, you'll find the calendar and you can just click on the calendar event. Anything that's blue is one of our free events. And if you click on either one of those, you'll be able to find the intro to the foundation courses. So you want to make sure that you register before it's too late. And so at the end of this week, we're going to be wrapping up registration. So if you are still interested or you still want to check out the BG5 foundation course, make sure you do that. All right. So let's jump into today. Today is about friction. This is trait number 6, and this is focus on bringing in the new. Now, the reason I have this picture here, because when I think of friction, what I always think of is lighting a match. Because in order to create, fire with a match, you have to, there has to be friction in order to light that match. And I thought it was very interesting, we're kind of this is really about bonding and about connecting. And I thought it was interesting that a match is a match, right? It also is connecting. And so we're going to take a look at, one of the deepest connections, one of the deepest emotional connections in taking a look at trait 6 of friction. So this is the fundamental design component of progress. So this is the law that growth cannot exist without friction, right? So if we want to grow, if we want to continue to expand, there has to be friction there. Otherwise, everything just stays in the status quo. So this is about friction. And this is the energy for producing life itself. All right, so this is one of the sexual traits as well. This can also be conflict, so there can be both friction and conflict, and this is also the source of the emotional wave. This is emotional intelligence itself. So this is what feeds emotional intelligence. So we're going to talk all about this and more as we take a look at and explore trait 6 of friction. So what I want to do is I want to start by turning it over to our panel, and anything that just stands out or anything that you would share your kind of immediate thoughts on friction and trait 6.
Yeah, I'll jump in real quick.
Yeah.
So one of the things that is really coming up for me, so I have trait 6 in an undefined emotional intelligence function. It's the only trait I have in that function. And you know, my tendency is to avoid conflict and avoid friction. But what I've noticed is that, just like you were talking about with the match, is that when we avoid it, it actually creates more separation. It really is leaning into it, is engaging with it, is not being afraid of that friction. Because whenever I embrace it and I move towards it and I sit with it, the intimacy that is created in that, both internally and between myself and another, is incredible, but it can feel super overwhelming and scary as well. And so I just think it's the irony of it is really cool, that it really is about leaning into that friction and not avoiding it.
Yeah, really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
How about for you, Lavina?
Well, Chris brings up a good point. The thing that I think of immediately whenever I see a trait that's in this particular function is about the nervousness or fear, maybe some kind of internal hesitancy to reveal who you really are with this trait. So the fear that shows up that's a fear of intimacy. And so what Chris was talking about really speaks beautifully to what we can learn to grow from this trait, whether you have it activated, it's dormant, or it's defined. This is a piece of you that you're here to either express or really learn a lot of deep wisdom from. So we know with Karen, you have this as your natural core expression of what you're doing in your intimate relationships, whether it be at home or at work, your interactions, you're building relationships by being an experience generator. And with Chris, she's learning about the fear and overcoming that fear so that she can face any kind of conflict that really is at the heart of what she needs to be here for when she's in her interaction with others. So for me, it's that wisdom potential because I don't have it at all. So we have all different kinds in this particular conversation. So it's nice to be able to hear from everybody. For me, it's just, how can we open up and be more vulnerable and be more honest and authentic in our relationships? And it really is about surrendering to what's the most important thing that we need to be right here, right now, in relational context with that other person. So I think that that's what we're going to have a lot of discussion around today.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly. How about for you, Natalie?
Yeah, well, tying into what both Lavina and Chris were sharing, that also I also have it in an undefined function. Recognizing also that when you embrace it and when you go into that friction doesn't always have to be conflict, right? And just opening yourself up and stepping over the fear of showing yourself, you may find that it is easier than you have thought on beforehand, and that the outcome even is better than what you ever have imagined. So it is really also the source of connecting, matching, and a wonderful trait. And also, it's also natural if you have the 6 to be kind of closed. So you're not as open on the other side. In the 59, you're really open to intimacy and pulling everybody in. With the 6, you kind of have this door, like it's closed or it's open, and it can be closed as well, and there's nothing wrong with that, as long as it comes from your healthy alignment, right? Mm-hmm. So and the closeness is there to produce this friction and then to be fruitful in relationship, whether it be personal or professionally. So yeah. Interesting one.
Yeah, most definitely. Any comments or questions so far from either Facebook or our Zoom room? So again, if you are here with us live in the BG5 Zoom room, you can feel free to either raise your hand or type in a comment. And Natalie is monitoring our BG5 Zoom room. And if you are joining us via Facebook, Lavina is monitoring our Facebook. So if you have any questions, please feel free to type in as well.
Yeah, so there. Oh, you want to say?
No, you can also address it, Chris, because it's speaking to you.
Yeah, so Alex in our in our chat room here said, after hearing Chris speak, is this trait where the anxious avoidant attachment style stems from? And my gut instinct is to say, yeah, it could be in this, in a, you know, and I think about my own experience in my own family and looking at the people in my own family, my parents and or siblings and my own children, and that who have defined emotional intelligence and or the six, and just looking at how we all interact. And I would say that yeah, that could, especially with that fear of intimacy and that. And you'll see in the next slide, we have a little bit, there's a little bit more about the dynamics that happen with this. So I don't know that any one thing, I'm always very hesitant to say that one thing in the design is going to kind of cause or be the, you know, cause and effect, because remember, our design is a synthesis and it really is nature and nurture. Mechanically speaking, though, what Natalie was just talking about, being closed or open, and that anxiousness and that fear of intimacy that Lavina was also talking about, and having an undefined emotional intelligence function where the shadow is to avoid confrontation and truth, all of these things sort of set someone up for the mechanics of that, of the anxiety, of that intimacy. And yet there's our experiences, and then there's other things that are happening in our design, and even the line qualities, all of these things. So my gut is yes, this is a major part of it, but let's not be, but with a caveat of not absolute.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Would anybody add anything to that, or?
Did you want to add something, Lavina?
You know, what was coming to mind for me is that this is the source, what we call the source wave of emotional intelligence. So what we find in people who have this as a trait that is defined, as in it's always on, it has its own component of how it operates, is that it is the one that controls the intimacy levels in the interaction with other people. My husband happens to have this in a defined function. So if he wants to have intimacy, hey, friction, we're going to be having some intimacy there. But if he's not, you know, open to that, it's just like there's this wall or something that shuts down and closes, and it's not something that's personal. This is something that is a response, something you're in the mood for. And sometimes it's all about timing, and there has to be, you know, friction goes both ways. The interaction goes, we need to have two people to have that. So it's something to really pay attention to, as far as honoring not only your moods, but your response to what life is asking of you, is one of the things that I noticed goes along with this match. Is it a match? Is it the right timing too?
Exactly. Exactly. You know, is it the right time to strike? And, you know, and it's the flame, it's the fire, you know, the flame and fire is something that, you know, is alive. That's the spark. And so I just find that to be sort of the perfect illustration of, you know, what I think of when I think of friction. Now, Chris was alluding to this next slide. So what we're focusing on today in particular is we're taking a look at quality 3. And you can see that quality 3 is allegiance. And remember, whenever we have a quality 3 is a pioneer. It's trial, it's error, it's you know, making mistakes and falling down and trying it again. It's also bonds made and bonds broken, right? So if you think about, you know, the bonds made and bonds broken, just like Natalie was talking about, you're either open or you're closed, or what Lavina was talking about, right? You're either open or closed. So there's the bonds made, which can be a very intimate bond, but there can also be the bonds broken as well. So with this allegiance, this is the ability to secure support and create strength out of a weak position. When connected to trait 59 on the other side, mating that results in conception. This is the ultimate of a creative strength and one of the ultimate of creative traits, because it is what creates life itself. Right? This is also the strength of sexuality, right? That intimate, deep connection. And again, talk about creativity. It is the creativity of life itself. But when we're talking about it in the business context, it can be the creation, of a business through allegiance in this case, or of an idea or a partnership, that type of thing as well. So again, when we're taking a look and focusing in on quality 3, again, it is about allegiance. Again, that ability to secure, support, and create strength out of a weak position. When we take a look at the elevation of this is the depth of feeling that can enrich union and intimacy. And this is also the destruction of old forms through union. So through union, you have the ability to create something completely new. And when you create something completely new, it can be either mundane, as above, it can be sexual union, or it can be elevated as universalization. So that is the elevation. When we take a look at what the challenge is sensitivity to controls, which may eventually reject intimacy. Again, the open to it or closed to it. And it's the rejection of allegiance as a submission to established order. All right, so that is both the elevation and the challenge when we're taking a look at this quality 3 of allegiance. And it's very interesting. This showed up for me big time this week, and I didn't actually realize it until afterwards. And it was very interesting. So where I happen to have a trait 6 in quality 3 is in my conscious maturing energy. So it's energy that can be kind of immature, and of course it's a 3, so it's making mistakes. So I was having a particular conversation, and I was so clear that it's kind of like my way or the highway, because I wanted to create something new. I wanted to create something different. And it was kind of like, it was kind of like wanting to reject it because I didn't want to submit to the established order. I wanted something different. And it happened with multiple people the other day. And I'm like, And it was interesting just because of the other trances too, how that got activated. And one of the things that's very interesting about the source wave, because I have that particular strength, I have the 59-6. As Lavina was talking about, it is the source wave, and it's the pure emotional builder strength, because it is the energy resource connected directly to emotional intelligence. And so one of the things that I've realized in having both the trait and the strength is I have to be really aware of my own emotions, because if I get triggered by others, and that's what happened that day, I got a bit triggered. My emotions are like, it basically feeds all the other waves. And so, for example, if with someone, for example, with my husband that has a tribal wave, if I am way off and I'm not watching myself, I can trigger his ratchet up, ratchet up, ratchet up, ratchet up wave until it explodes, which is part of what happened. And so, it's kind of being able to really be aware of, I have to be really aware of my own emotions, because I can trigger the emotions of others, being that source wave.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Lavina.
That was a wonderful story. Thank you for illustrating it and being open to expressing your vulnerability of how that works for you. The other thing that comes to mind when we take a look at this trait is, just like I was saying, how it controls the intimacy levels. What we learned from you in OC16 is that it can also dull or bring down the wave. It can control the energy frequency so that everybody is a little bit more, could say, controllable or more calm. It really depends on your frequency. You're the one that's setting the tone for what's happening in large groups of people. Would you like to share any more about how that works for you? Have you seen it at work?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very interesting because just as Lavina was saying, it is in OC16, it is, in a sense, the source of interaction. It is what creates in essence, the frequency of how people interact and the environment in which people interact in a group situation. And the 6 is actually the regulator. So it kind of regulates the emotion. So if you are ever in a large group or a large organization, or even like, for example, at a sporting event, I just went to the Bronco game on Sunday. You know, sometimes you want to amp everybody up, right? You want to get everybody cheering and on their feet and yelling and screaming. And then at other times you want them to be really quiet. You know, so it's this regulated energy of the crowd getting really crazy, you know, and then if they need to concentrate, like when I was marshaling and assisting or volunteering at the US Open, you know, it's kind of exactly the opposite. You have to like calm everybody down and quiet everyone down. And so it has the ability to, again, either raise the emotion or lower the emotion. It's the regulator. It regulates the emotion itself.
Such a powerful trait, and we can see this as an example. You're going to have somebody who actually has this quality itself, but I think of, every time I see this strength, I think of Richard Branson, because he's a businessman who actually has built large corporations based on this inclusivity and this building of a culture that people want to feel like they belong to, and they feel valued and maybe cared for, that they matter.
Yeah.
That's one of the things I noticed that you've built at the BG5 Business Institute too. It's not just that we who work there matter, everybody matters. We really have a caring kind of culture that happens there.
Yeah. It's like bringing everybody into the family and having everybody feel as one, right? And everybody feel connected, that they're a part of something bigger than themselves.
You know, it's interesting as you're talking about that, because again, so you have the whole strength plus the trait, and I have just the trait and undefined emotional intelligence function. And so I think about the open closed, and I think about that like wanting everyone. And it's interesting because on the one hand, I can feel everyone, and sometimes that's too intense. And so I close down. And I will shut down, because that empathetic, that openness there can feel what is not being said at such a primal level. And I was thinking about, you know, kind of what, as a kid, like that whole anxiety, and just a little bit about Alex's question, you know, that anxiety and that, and what opens me up to someone or closes it down, whether that's in intimacy or just emotionally. And one of the things that I'm noticing is that when someone says something, but the emotion that I'm perceiving does not match how they're showing up, I will often close down, and it happens so fast. I don't even know that it's happening, you know, and that's usually with people that are closer to me, clients, people outside. It's different. There's a different interaction there, but I'm just curious. I'm curious if you understand what I'm talking about there, Natalie, or if anybody else gets that. So on the one hand, what you were just saying, Karen, about everybody, it feels like everybody's included. On the one hand, I deeply feel that, and yet there's times when I close off to that because it's too intimate, it's too loud. So I'm just curious. Yeah, Natalie, what do you have to say about that, or anybody else?
We are the wholeness of our design, and I have other aspects as well that I really go like, okay. Just be on myself, and it is, you know, you may kind of make yourself wrong for not opening up all the time, but I now actually enjoy it, and you know, it's not a negative thing, you know. It's also meant to preserve you for getting overwhelmed or the things you described. So yeah, really feeling into that. So yeah, I do notice that, and Yeah, but that's coming from other aspects. I can be very clear on that as well, but that's not from the 6 itself.
Right.
Yeah.
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 Very interesting.
And
It's,
and the
yeah.
other thing, yeah, the other thing as well, if you have the 6, you are made to create friction, eh? So
Mm.
it may be fearful if you have an open emotional intelligence, but by creating the friction, something is waken up, something is started, to either, in this case, destruct something that's not working anymore, or to create the intimate bond. And also it is a thing that happens over time. It's not like the first instant you either have this deep connection or not. It's over time feeling it out. That's also what the emotional wave does, and specifically with your strength, Karen, it's an over time thing. In case if you have the full strength, you have this first response, but then over time, if it will be this deep connection or not.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
It's interesting too what you're just saying about that we bring friction, because I've had a number of clients who either come to me, their partner, their loved one, their intimate partner, or business partners. I've had several business partners, and they come and they're not dealing with anything. They're not dealing with what's really going on. They haven't rejected the submission to the established order or something, or they're just like hanging on. And I will bring friction, not in a major way, but in the like poking at things, and bring the friction and hold the space for the friction so that they can deal with it. And it's really interesting to watch it there, because I'm fearless when it comes to that, but it's sort of like, look at my own intimate relations, like, so there we go. There's my vulnerability for the day. But yeah, just it's interesting how we can really use it in business, or use it as consultants or as clinicians, or however we are working, or analysts,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Coaching.
And the other thing, because I found it interesting what you were sharing, Karen, about what happened this week, elevation and challenge. Challenge is not a bad thing, eh? So it's there also. It's the spectrum, and sometimes it's necessary to have this, full rejection and your emotional whatever comes up, to be able to step over it, talk about it, get it out of the way, or whatever, So this is also the thing with looking at the qualities and the elevation and the challenge. It's not a positive and a negative. It's just an elevation and a challenge, but not positive and negative. And it serves, both sides serve something. It's made for something. Sometimes in your design, you only have one. And if you have only, the arrow pointing down, you have only the challenge, and people think, oh my gosh, it's all this negativity. It's not negativity. You contribute something. That's what you're designed to do. So,
Yeah, it's really interesting what both of you just said, because again, with the challenge of it, it's almost like again, we were talking about the synthesis of your design, and there's lots of different things that when you take a look at the synthesis of your design, you start to see repeating patterns. And one of my repeating patterns is creating something old, not from something new, but something based on the past. And this is kind of the same thing. It's the destruction of old forms through union. And so sometimes, especially I was just talking about this in my Foundation 2 class, we were talking about the different thematics, right? And if you have an individual thematic, and it's about empowerment. And when you're talking about empowerment, the status quo doesn't like things that are new. The tribe, the tradition doesn't like things that are new. And so this established order of the collective, this established order of the tribe doesn't like what's new. But what the individual here is here to do is bring what's new. And when you first bring something new, it might at first get rejected because it's something new and people don't quite get it. And you know, they're fixed in their own ways and want to do things in a certain way. And it's almost like the friction, you know, as Natalie was saying, kind of opens it up to like, oh, there's something new. And at first there's a rejection of what's, you know, a rejection of what's new. And this is, if you take a look at it, the ability to secure support and create strength out of a weak position. So it may at first start out like it's, you know, like there's no chance, there's no hope, you know, and just through a lot, you know, through this allegiance and through working through it and through that spark, something new can then emerge out of that.
Exactly. And it's sort of like when we introduce a new system or something like that, like human design, to somebody who seems very closed off to it. I remember I've had a number of clients who bring their husbands to come to sessions with me. And, you know, I've worked with construction workers, I've worked with manufacturing, I've worked with lawyers and accountants and engineers and, you know, like very left brain logical, right? And they come in, okay, whatever, what is this? And I'm like, yeah, don't believe anything I say. I totally get it. Like I could, you know, just align with them, like emotionally feel what they're feeling and create an allegiance and an emotional allegiance that's completely unattached to whether or not they get it. And what happens is the shift, because then they don't have anything to defend against, right? And so then the shift, then they can just receive. And that's a lot of what you were just talking about, is that it's the ability to create that allegiance, the ability to feel what do they need to feel or hear or be, feel safe in emotionally so that they can receive, so that they can hear the idea. A lot of times when I'm working with my communication clients or speaking clients, it's sort of like, okay, I got your idea, but you're not connecting at all with the audience. Like emotionally, we got to create that connection, because to change someone's mind, you have to speak to their heart first, period. And I think this trait really does that.
Yeah. Beautifully said, Chris. Yeah. Anything in Facebook or the Zoom room that anyone would like to contribute or say or share?
Well, we have some comments, and yeah, no one is raising their hand. We have quite a bit of people here. So Renee's all shared. I have also found that having trait 6 in an undefined emotional intelligence allows me to feel things intensely without having to commit to a wave pattern of the emotional intelligence. But then the defined people around me will get thrown into this wave pattern from me sharing what I'm feeling.
Yeah. Again, this is the source wave. You know, it's interesting. The mirror on the other side, which is the 50, is the source of intelligence. This is the source of emotional intelligence, and it's the source of the emotional wave. So yeah, very interesting. We have another example here as well. Lavina, is there anything in Facebook currently?
Yeah, there's a couple little pieces. Carla is saying has this trait and are finding amazing what you are all sharing. Thank you. And I know that she has it undefined, like Chris and Natalie. And then someone else is asking if we know of Doug Coe, the family chart. He is the fellowship/pray breakfast founder / leader. And I haven't heard of that, so I don't know.
I haven't heard of that either, but I did want to, Alex asked something in the chat room, and he said, am I comprehending correctly in saying that not having trait 6 indicates openness to receiving or becoming emotionally elated, and having a trait 6 indicates an ability to create emotional elation? Karen, Lavina, I don't know if it's that cut and dry, but I'd like to hear what you have to say.
I don't know if the question is really Yeah, it's
It's a tough one.
not exactly.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah, it's not. No, because even if you don't have it, right? I mean,
Right.
Lavina, you
Exactly.
feel elated. You have emotions. We all have everything in the design, right? So it's just what we're looking at is if you have it defined, it's going to be sort of turned on 24/7. Whereas if it's undefined, it's going to turn on. It's inconsistent.
Right.
But that doesn't mean it's either or.
Yeah.
Human design, I've never seen it be either or.
Yeah.
It's always a synthesis of everything that's going on. That's why it's so rich
Yeah.
in its description and depth. So
Yeah.
hopefully that helps, Alex. Yeah.
Yeah. And you know, here we have just as an example, we can take a look at a famous individual. This is John Ritter. He was an actor and a comedian, and he has trait 6 in quality 3 as part of his core essence, as part of his life work. And it's interesting, if you take a look here, you can see it's in an undefined emotional intelligence. So a lot of what, you know, Chris and Natalie were talking about with that experience of this is, you know, this is about gaining wisdom from here. And also if you have, for example, I also have my core essence in a function that's undefined. It's almost like part of your life work is really, you know, connecting with others. And so his core essence or his life work is experience or Eden. So that's sort of the thematic. So his life work is you use your experience with conflict and crisis to hold the bond of intimacy together, gaining experience through the loss of innocence. And it's very interesting. One of the things that John Ritter is best known for is he's best known for his role as Jack Tripper in ABC's television sitcom called Three's Company. And so this was a quote from John Ritter talking about what he does. He said, you know, most people don't know that I'm an accomplished dramatic actor, but I've performed in several Shakespearean productions, including Hamlet. Except this version, which is the Three's Company's version, Hamlet lives in an apartment with 2 women and has to pretend that he's gay so that the landlord won't evict him. So it's very interesting that, you know, the way that this particular sitcom was set up, you know, it was the landlord didn't want him to be roommates with 2 women if he was straight. So he had to pretend that he was gay in order to be able to be a roommate with these 2 women. And so again, and so that's really the premise of the whole show, and him trying to, in a sense, sort of hide that he's straight, especially when the landlord comes around. And so again, it's kind of this, you know, experience, you know, the conflict and the crisis, you know, to hold the bond of intimacy together. So you know, the crisis that he didn't want to be kicked out by the landlord, you know, also created this sort of tight bond between him and his 2 female roommates. And so you could really see this come out in the character that he played in Three's Company. So I just thought that was very interesting. Yeah, anything that anyone would like to add who's familiar with John Ritter or familiar with Three's Company?
I just love that. And it totally makes sense. I grew up watching that, you know, like after school. And so just, yeah, it just makes me laugh that he was really able to do that, both slapstick plus very, you know, yeah. And I've seen him in dramatic roles, and it's really, he's very good. It's really a good actor. So it was.
Yeah, exactly. You know, so it's kind of nice sort of tying in, and anytime you look at an actor and their performance and kind of taking a look at the characters that they play, a lot of times you'll see a lot of their design actually show up within the characters that they play as well, which I think is really, really fascinating. Beautiful. And just so you can see, this is my design. So again, I have it in maturing energy. So this is that dynamic maturing energy. So it's something that in a sense can always get me in trouble, sort of the immature side of it. And it always, I remember I used to work for Up With People, and there was a time where there was like this conflict that arose, and they were talking, they were saying that I was, immature, insecure and unprofessional. And I was like, I was devastated. And, and this was kind of the immaturity, and it was providing this conflict, and then my little insecurity in my 1-3. And so in this particular, instant, it was something that, I produced some conflict. It got a couple people upset. But then it was also, again, if you can approach it as, again, this is always my maturing energy. So it's always something that I'm kind of learning from and maturing from. And, ultimately, we were able to kind of work it through and walk it through. And I was able to see, what caused the conflict. And it provided, again, a deeper intimacy in being able to see, okay, this was the issue, this was the problem, but in being able to realize it, there was growth that was then possible, also a maturing that was possible through that as well. Yeah, very cool. All right. Well, any last? Well, actually, let's just kind of go through these last pieces here. Again, if you are not familiar with your own design, you want to get a sense of what your career type is, you can go and get our free report at the BG5businessinstitute.com. Remember, if you want to sign up for the foundation courses, this is the last week to find out more about and attend the free webinars on the BG5 Foundation course. So you can join either Natalie or Lavina's class. So make sure you check that out on the calendar. This is also where you can find past episodes of BG5 Live here as well. So again, you can check out the free trial, and our classes are now starting and underway. And this is the last week to sign up. And also next week, Chris is going to be starting the profit potential workshops. So she's going to be starting with communication and action. Actually, tomorrow I'm going to be starting with the energy resource. So you have 2 options to choose from, whichever one you would like to start with. But I do encourage you to start with Chris, starting next week, next Tuesday. So check it out. All right. So we've come to the end of another BG5 Live. So what we're going to do before we wrap everything up is, first of all, see if there's any questions or comments, and then we'll get the last word from our panel. So any last questions or comments before we wrap up, either from our Facebook Live or from our Zoom room?
Well, there is, Alex is still unclear on the difference between defined and undefined emotional center function, and then having the dynamic of having or not having trait 6. I tried to type in something, but this is really something that you learn in the foundation course, how it operates if you have a defined function in healthy and unhealthy ways, if you have an undefined function in consistent energy, and then if you have a trait, it's the flavor that it gives, etc. So there you have the opportunity also to watch, for instance, my Monkey Mind webinar that's still there, that talks a little bit about shadows, not about specific traits, but this is really what you learn to understand in the differences.
Yeah. Exactly. And here we're just kind of playing with each of the individual traits and just kind of exploring each of the individual traits. But again, to get the broader context, again, when we took a look at John Ritter, just like Chris and Natalie, we can see that it's undefined. So having trait 6 in an undefined function, this can be as big as shadow, avoiding intimacy, avoiding confrontation. It can be touchy, nervous, right? So this can be not only the shadow, but it can also be his greatest area of wisdom as well. Same for Natalie, and same for Chris as well. Both Lavina and I have it defined. I do have the 6 defined in a defined emotional intelligence. Lavina has emotional intelligence defined, but does not have trait 6. And so when emotional intelligence is defined, it is a consistent source of energy. And if you have it defined, it is your decision-making strategy. And as Natalie was pointing out earlier, it's about waiting for clarity, right? Don't make decisions in the moment. If you happen to have it defined, that is not where you are here to make decisions. It takes time. You have to ride through your wave, and each one of the things we take a look at in the foundation course are each of the individual waves of emotional intelligence. So you can see that this system is really deep, and the more that you kind of peel back layers of the onion, the more you learn, but the more you learn you don't know as well.
Yeah.
I appreciate, Alex, all of your questions, and yeah, it's kind of beyond the scope of what we're doing, but that puts it in a nutshell. Yes, Lavina.
We have another one like that from Facebook. Elena is asking, I have both 6.4 and 6.5 coming from the emotional intelligence, no other activations. And it is from her unusualness. And how would you reflect on this? So same answer here is it's too broad of a question without looking specifically at the design. We can't really give much more than generalities like what Karen just went over. When it's in an undefined function, we have one of your strongest shadows. So if you would like to come to the foundation course, we can help you understand how it shows up for you, because when we have the whole picture in front of us, now we can really put it into context. And that's what those foundation courses are for.
Yeah.
The profit potential workshops are also great for that as well. So if you are familiar with your design, and the profit potential workshops really look more at how would you use that? How do those shadows and distractions actually make you money? And so that's another course that you can look at if you already do have the foundational pieces, but would like to understand those pieces more.
Yeah, so exactly.
We have one hand raised from Ellen.
Yeah.
So Ellen, you can unmute yourself.
Hello.
Hi.
Yeah, I didn't see the whole show, so I sort of took a while to think in all what you were saying about the trait 6. But I've just had this one thing, because I think I have it unconscious in the undefined center. And I was just thinking, because, if you are undefined emotionally, you are basically sort of going away from the conflict, right? You are sort of, you avoid the truth and the conflict. But I notice both, because I notice that in a certain, like in my relationships, like with my husband or with my prior relationships, I'm very prone to being, like Chris said earlier, being the one to sort of point out things and not go out of the way of a conflict. I would always head it on. I started up. But more in a work setting, or or be more of the avoiding of the conflict, like more of the open emotional center. So I guess that was an interesting realization for me. That it's sort of a combination, you have the trait 6, but also the open center. So I don't know if that was something that would fit into this, if that's proper assessment. Is that does that sound okay?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Ellen. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And great observation.
Okay. Well, and I'm looking forward to starting the course, so that's fine.
Yay. Ellen is actually in the foundation course, so she will dive into this in great depth.
Yay.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's wrap everything up for today. So let's just get our last words from our panel, and then we'll wrap up our BG5 Live for today. So, do you want to start, Natalie?
Yeah. So go out and create friction, because it it will bring creativity and understanding. And don't be afraid to do so if necessary, if it feels truthful to you, and trust your decision-making strategy for the timing of it.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you, Natalie. How about you, Chris?
I love that. That's so great. Yeah, I am. I'm just thinking about that. Like, where could I lean into some friction today or start something? So, and I really love this conversation about emotional intelligence. There's a lot of information out there about emotional intelligence. And I have to say that when I took other tests and looking at different systems around emotional intelligence, I hated all of it. I felt like, oh my God, I don't have any skills whatsoever. This is terrible. And then I really started diving into human design, career design, and looking at how my specific emotional intelligence function really works, and my clients and my family. And I saw that it is so much richer, and there's so much more information that's available that is so honoring of our true experience of emotions, not just someone telling like, this is, you're emotionally intelligent or not. Right. That's how it's sort of taught in other systems. And here it's like, everybody's emotionally intelligent, but how right. That is. And so having trait 6, that is something that I'm just super passionate about. And so I really enjoyed this conversation today.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you, Chris.
Mm-hmm.
How about for you, Lavina?
Thanks, Karen. I had a reminder during this session about this book that I'm reading. I can't remember the title at the moment, but it's a business leadership book. And the guy has tons of accolades at the beginning. So I know he's famous. You guys would recognize him, but I didn't know who he was. One of the primary principles was that if you can feel it, you can do anything. And it's about, in the emotional intelligence, for those of you who have it undefined, so it's not on about half of us. This week, you might find, because there's 2 activations that are creating this energy, you might find that there's a lot of generative energy to feel something, and to, instead of running away from the feeling, to let yourself feel it and just be with it, sit with it. Don't have to do anything, change it, make it mean anything. That's the biggest thing. Doesn't have to mean anything. Just feel, breathe, and allow, and watch that ebb and flow of emotion, and just watch it. Just be with it. Don't do anything about it. You don't have to. You can just allow it and see what happens from that experience. So that's my advice for this week with what's going on in our energetic frequencies of the planet right now.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. Thank you, Lavina. Yeah, and and creating strength out of a weak position. So don't give up. And sometimes, just like what Natalie said, create some friction. Sometimes that friction is the spark that creates something new, that allows something new to unfold. So thank you, each and every one of you. It was great. It was a really beautiful and rich discussion. And thank you for all of you that contributed. Thank you to our panel. And we look forward to seeing you all next week. All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.